What about for a woman? If a woman doesn't orgasm, I feel like it's not as clear cut that like there's not like a negative body reaction if you don't orgasm.
Sure, there is. You're frustrated. Your sex, it's the same thing. The blue vulva, blue vagina, blue whatever word you want to make. So many women report masturbating after sex with a partner. Why? Because they have blue pussy. Excuse my French.
I'm Sara Jane Ho, and this is Mind Your Manners, where no topic is off limits as we uncover the secrets to feeling at ease in every situation. Remember sex ed? Awkward, blushing, clamming up, just hoping you wouldn't get called on to pin the hymen on the vagina? Don't worry. Today, we're going to do something a little different, a little more sophisticated. Today, we're leveling up our libidos. Welcome to Sex Etiquette. My guest is Dr. Laurie Mintz, a renowned sex therapist, psychologist, and author of 2 books on sex, Becoming Clitorate and A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex. Today, she's here to help us understand the rules of intimacy, how to talk about sex with grace, set boundaries with confidence, and yes, make sure everyone's enjoying the ride. So whether you've been faking it, avoiding it, or just curious how to ask for what you really want in bed without killing the mood, this one's for you. Think of it as the good manners of the bedroom. Hi, Dr. Laurie.
Hello. Thank you for having me. What a great intro. Thank you.
So tell us, how did you become an advocate for sexual wellness?
Well, there's a long story, but the bottom line, I'll try to be brief, is I was trained as a psychologist and I had been a practicing psychologist for about 15 years when honestly I lost my own sex drive. I had 2 little kids and this pretty stressful job, as many women do. And all of a sudden, it's like, where did my sex drive go? So I started talking to my clients, asking them, how's your sex life? Even though I'd not been trained in that in grad school, talking to my friends and everybody I talked to, it was like, well, as long as you're asking, I have a problem. So I thought, I've been trained to read research, to work with people. There's got to be literature out there. So I did a deep dive into the literature, found out, yes, there were solutions I'd never been trained on, trained myself, started working with myself, clients, and it worked. So I published that into the book, A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex. And then everything I did started being about sex. Clients would come to me about sex. I started teaching about sex in my graduate school training program where I was a faculty. And then I eventually got a job where I was offered to teach the undergrad students the psychology of human sexuality. And it was through teaching them that I found out, oh my heavens, young women are not having orgasms. They don't even know their body. They've never heard of the clitoris. So I started teaching to that. And I would get notes from my students. Thanks to your class, I'm orgasmic. Thanks to your class, my girlfriend's orgasmic. And that's when I wrote Becoming Clitorate.
Wow. And why is sex etiquette an essential but overlooked part of relationships?
Such a good question. Sex is a vital part of life and relationships. And what we know is if sex is going well, we often don't think about it except when it's time. But if sex is not going well, it consumes people's mind. It affects their well-being. We know that high quality sex is associated with overall life and relationship satisfaction, and sexual dissatisfaction is related to relationship dissatisfaction and life dissatisfaction. So we have to attend to this really important part of our lives that people don't talk about.
That is so true. And I think we've all been on both ends of that, where it's satisfying and where it's dissatisfying. And oftentimes when it's dissatisfying, we really struggle to talk about it. Why do we struggle to talk about sex?
Well, we've been raised, a lot of people, our whole culture. It's such an irony. Women in our culture are sexualized, but we're not told to assert our sexual rights. We're told that myths like sex should be easy and comfortable, yet we're never taught how to make it so. So, like, we're really raised in a pretty sex negative culture, especially for women.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the cultural taboos, the lack of education, and growing up in Hong Kong, which is very conservative, I never got the sex talk from my parents. And it's something actually we discussed on episode 1 of my Mind Your Manners podcast, where I had Selling Sunset star Mary Bonnet on. And neither of us got the sex talk from our parents, because it starts with that, right? And she ended up being a teenage mother at 16 because she had no idea what was going on. So let's jump into a couple of the things you mentioned. And I want to talk about sort of the etiquette of pleasure and something you just touched on, which was orgasming. So help us understand the orgasm gap. What is it? Why does it exist? What are the statistics around it?
Yeah, so the orgasm gap is the consistent finding in over 30 years of research that when cisgender women get it on with cisgender men, the women are having way fewer orgasms. So there's so many studies, but one of the most biggest classic studies said it was 95% of men said they always orgasm during sex, compared to like 65% of women. And adding to that, so many people say, oh, well, the orgasm gap is because women's orgasms are difficult or elusive. But two other gaps make it clear that it's culture and not our body. When women are alone, 95% orgasm easily and within minutes. We know how to do it when we're alone. And when women get it on with other women, they have way more orgasms than when they get it on with men. I just need to share one more statistic. In the most, I think, telling study, bisexual women who hooked up with women and men, so same woman, same body, when their partner was a male, they orgasmed 7% of the time. When a woman, 64% of the time.
And why is that? It More
Well,
foreplay? I mean, for a lot of men, it's
well,
like no foreplay.
well, when you're with a woman, there isn't foreplay, it's all play. I mean, there
Right.
isn't one act that you revolve the whole thing around. So we don't have to use this word foreplay, which implies it's just a lead up to the main event. So the reason heterosexual sex, women aren't orgasming, we revolve the whole thing around an act, penetration. We call that sex, which is, crazy to me. We call what leads up before foreplay, when foreplay is the real play for women. That's the clitoral stimulation. So that's when women pleasure themselves, 99% do so with external stimulation, sometimes alone, sometimes with penetration.
Yeah, foreplay is so important. And, it's like I've dated in both, I've dated sort of around the world, but I've spent my life living in mostly the US and China. And sort of an inside joke I had with my girlfriends for dating Chinese men, and let's hope I don't get canceled by Chinese men by this, is that there's no foreplay or very rarely foreplay. And it does go to something cultural where it's almost like as a woman, it's your duty as opposed to about pleasure. And there was a 2019 survey when talking about orgasm frequency that only 13% of Chinese women report reaching orgasm every time they have sex, compared to 44% of men. It's kind of surprising that actually Chinese men don't always orgasm. But
Yeah.
I mean, but the 13% of Chinese women reaching orgasm every time they have sex is shockingly low, especially compared to American women. And
Right.
and so I do think like there is this big cultural context where traditional attitudes towards sexuality and limited sexual education contributes to lower rates of orgasm. You know,
Yes.
Oh, and then actually, I was looking at statistics for on foreplay, and on average in the U.S., foreplay lasts 11 to 13 minutes, whereas in China, it's 1 to 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh. That what makes, first of all, again, like that's so against women's main route to pleasure. Women's main route to pleasure is the acts of foreplay, oral sex, clitoral stimulation. But what makes me wonder about that we're talking about, I wonder if there's a higher incidence of sexual pain among Chinese women because penetration before you're aroused enough, before you lubricate, before the cervix pulls up and out of the way, is likely to result in pain. And so, if you're only spending 1 to 5 minutes, I'm guessing there's more pain.
Yeah, which means it's less pleasurable, right? That's
Right.
that's a really, really good point. Yeah. And for, if there are any male listeners out there, remember, more foreplay equals more pleasurable sex for your partner.
Yes.
So, Dr. Laurie, how important is it for a woman to orgasm? Because there are actually some women who don't feel the need. Like, I have girlfriends, whether in China or wherever, and they almost just think it's like the female pleasure is secondary or even unnecessary.
Well, that's cultural, right? That's a cultural belief. Even though, again, the words we use, foreplay, makes it sound like it is secondary. It's just a lead up to the main event. And, certainly, let's ask this question in reverse and see how crazy it sounds. How important is it for men to orgasm, right?
So important. That's like the thing. That's like the goal almost of sex.
Right. So why is it? Is it because we don't care about orgasm? Like there are studies that say women are satisfied without orgasm, but I can't help but wonder that if that's just even more of this culturally ingrained belief that A, it doesn't matter, and B, we're not going to get it anyway, so why care about it? But, we are built to orgasm. We can orgasm. It's the culture that's telling us that it's not important or not attainable.
And well, I guess for men, if they don't orgasm, I mean, they get that term blue balls, right? I mean, it's actually painful for them or uncomfortable for them if they don't orgasm. But what about for a woman? If a woman doesn't orgasm, I feel like it's not as clear cut that like there's not like a negative body reaction if you don't orgasm.
Sure, there is. You're frustrated. You're sex. It's the same thing. The blue vulva, blue vagina, blue whatever word you want to make. So many women report masturbating after sex with a partner. Why? Because they have blue pussy. Excuse my French.
I love it. So it's a real thing. I mean, do we have numbers around how many women masturbate after sex? I'm curious to know.
No, but it's extremely common.
I've done that before. Have you done that before?
I pretty much orgasm every time I write about this. So, no. I'm not saying never, but pretty rarely.
So I actually I have a confession to make, which is that my first orgasm, I mean, I did have like orgasms from clitoral stimulation, but my first orgasm from masturbating myself wasn't actually until I was 35 or 36 years old, 35 years old. I guess like I'm trying to think why. And firstly, I've always, I mean, again, raised in Chinese in a very extremely conservative culture in Hong Kong. It's not talked about, even amongst friends. And then I was sort of very busy doing my various startups, and working around the clock. And I'd been gifted sex toys before, right? So whether from girlfriends as a gag gift on a birthday or from other partners, but somehow I wasn't switched on or ready for it. And it wasn't until during COVID, mainland China had these really serious hotel quarantines where you had to spend 14 days in a 300 square foot room, 200 square foot room, and you couldn't leave your front door. And so, of course, that led to a lot of time that needed to be passed. And it was December of 2021. I had just landed back in Shanghai after shooting my Netflix show, Mind Your Manners, in Sydney. And I was actually single at the time. But I was sitting around in my hotel room and I thought, you know what? I'm feeling kind of horny. I think I have a lot of time to kill. I went on to Taobao and bought my first sex toy, which was a Lilo. It was like a lavender lily 3 Lilo sex toy. And it was just kind of incredible. It helped me reach orgasm in seconds with like multiple aftershocks.
Well, it's so funny that, you're not alone. A lot of women don't bring themselves to orgasm till later in life. And this is really, I'm thrilled to hear you did that. I'm thrilled to hear you used a vibrator. And I don't know if you know this, but I am an expert for Lilo. I am a huge endorser of their sex products. Yes, they're very well made. They're excellent.
And they just kind of help elevate the whole experience. But they are really, really very good. So wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious to know, like, what are the statistics around women masturbating later in life?
I'm not sure exactly. I just know that, well, there's like two things I can tell you that women are much more likely to like reach orgasm through masturbation. A lot of young girls will discover masturbation accidentally by rubbing against a stuffed animal or, something like a, climbing gym. But when that does, and then they'll like wonder, oh, that feels good, and continue that. But a lot of women, especially who've been told sex is bad or sex is dirty, don't touch yourself, they won't masturbate like you until much later in life when they're like, wonder what this feels like. I think this could be good. Yeah.
And you know something? Since I've done that, I think 10 of my girlfriends have bought the Lilo Lavender Lily 3. It's pretty amazing, and they all report back.
Well, you have to put a little link
I
into the
know.
show notes for that. I can send you. I'll send you a link after the.
Please
I'll
do.
send you a special link after the. My favorite is actually the Mia 3.
Huh.
I love that one. Yeah, but I have a friend that's just won't go anywhere without her Sona Cruise. So
So, tell us about how reaching orgasm impacts relationships and helps build a woman's sexual confidence.
absolutely. But would you allow me to say one thing more about vibrators
Please
before
do.
we move on? Okay, thank you. So, we know from research that women who use vibrators have easier and more frequent orgasms. We know that a man's endorsement of his partner's vibrator use is related to her sexual satisfaction. And there is a biological reason that vibrators work, and a lot of people don't know this. And so that's why I really want to share it, that we have special receptors all over our body to vibration. There's like none on our forehead. If you put a vibrator right here, you won't really feel it. If you put it on the tip of your finger, you'll feel it. If you put it on your vulva, which is the outside area of the genitals, you're going to really feel it. And both the penis and the vulva have tons of receptors for vibration. It's amazing how modern technology and biology match, because the ideal vibratory pattern or hertz in our vulvas is the same as what the modern day vibrator has. Isn't that something?
Wow, that is
Yeah.
really, really interesting. And it's also interesting
Yeah.
what you said about how when a woman's partner is receptive to her using a vibrator, it makes for
Yes.
a better, was it you say relationship and more sexual confidence?
It makes more orgasms. And so that then leads to your next question. How do women's orgasms affect relationships? They make them happier because, like, women who are sexually satisfied they're happier with their relationship. There's just, that is very clear correlation. And so someone who's happier in their life, in their relationship, and they're also probably sleeping better because orgasms, are good for sleep, they're good for pain, they're good for stress reduction. So, we really need to start considering, I mean, I don't want people to feel pressured to
Right?
orgasm, right? Okay, because like the pressure to have an orgasm is going to make one less likely. But I don't want people to dismiss the importance of their orgasms as women.
If you're a woman in a sexual relationship, uh, what is the etiquette of asking for what you want in bed? How do we advocate for pleasure without discomfort?
It's really interesting if we take another cultural step back. Men don't even have to advocate for their own pleasure, do they? Because the whole encounter is set up to for their pleasure. It's only women who think, "Ooh, can I ask for what I want?" So when we think about that, we can really see the insidious nature of this. And women are often told it's pushy to ask for what you want. And what I want to say is no one can read your mind. No one can read your vagina, you know. The only way you're going to get pleasure is by saying what feels good, and it is not pushy. And so I think it's the best way to do it if you're in a long-term relationship is to do it outside the bedroom, to have a conversation. Hey, I really love you. I really want our sex life to be as wonderful for both of us as it can be. And I was listening to this great podcast, and I learned that a lot of women enjoy sexual encounters more when they have a lot of clitoral stimulation or use a vibrator before, during, or after intercourse. And I want to try that.
Yeah, what a great script. And you know something? I find that men are actually very attracted when a woman knows what she wants in bed and she tells him what she wants in bed. It's actually very attractive and very sexy. And there's this interesting phenomenon. A lot of my girlfriends who are my age, of late 30s, or even some who are older in their 40s, who are divorced, a lot of them are dating they have much younger boyfriends in their 20s. And what my older girlfriends are telling me is that they feel very confident in what they want as women in bed, and they just kind of tell the younger boyfriends, and the younger boyfriends just love it. Like,
Yeah.
and it's something that a lot of 20-year-old girls may not have that same confidence in as as later on in life. So
Yeah. And I think that men want to please women. There's been research studies that they really do, but they've been misled by porn, et cetera, and women faking. So, saying what you want can be very helpful and is empowering for you. And men get off on women's pleasure. Most men really get off on women's pleasure. And so, why not have real pleasure instead of fake pleasure by telling your partner what you want?
absolutely. By the way, porn is something I want to get into later on. But first, move on to reigniting desire in long-term relationships. Because I do feel that's a trend that I hear among some of my married girlfriends who've, they're one kid in the way, two kids in the way, similar to, how you were first inspired to go into this field. Uh, because passion naturally fades over time. So how do we bring it back?
Well, first of all, knowing what you just said, knowing it's normal. Like so many people don't know that, and they say, oh, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my relationship? But it's like a biological thing. Over, like when you're first falling in love and you can't keep your hands off each other, it's this new stimulus, this new love object. Well, over time, you're not going to feel the same way. You're living with someone, you're changing diapers with someone, all of that. You're not going to still stay in that mode. And so the idea that people need to understand that that's normal and there's nothing wrong with them or their relationship, but that they have to do things differently. Like, I always give this example. Like, you and I didn't just happen to log on to this platform at the same time. Like, we actually said, this is important to us. We put it in the calendar. We even had to reschedule a couple times, but we both showed up because we committed to spend this time together. And that is what couples need to do. And there's two types of desire: responsive desire and spontaneous desire. Spontaneous desire is, oh, I suddenly feel horny. And we stop feeling that when we're older and living with someone and have all, but you can have what's called responsive desire. I'm open to the idea of sex and I'm going to enjoy it when it gets going. And so for a lot of women, the sex comes before the desire. The touch leads to the desire. So I tell people, put it in the calendar, say it's important. And when you're having sex, communicate what you want and stay present in your body, stay mindful.
So it sounds like there's an element of routine and versus novelty, right? And couples need both.
Well, yes, absolutely. Couples need both, but for some stages of life, it's very hard to find novelty. So, I mean, when you're dating and you're single and that's a lot easier, but when you have two kids and two jobs, you can have a routine. We have sex every Saturday when the baby naps, but within that routine, you can use novel activities to spice it up. And that's also very important.
Yeah, because what happens if you don't do that? Is that when affairs happen and
Well, I think that's a kind of a generalization. That I think affairs happen for so many reasons, but yes, they are more likely to happen in a sexless marriage. And so the bottom line is truly like making sex a priority in your relationship, making a conscious effort.
yeah. And it is very, very important. It's funny, when I first got together with my husband in the very beginning, he sat me down and he was like, sex is very important to me. And he just communicated up front there. And I was like, okay, yes, I agree. And and I think it's important to talk about sex even early on in your relationship, to not wait till something is going wrong. What about overcoming sexual shame and embracing pleasure? We mentioned cultural context a few times, and that naturally just made me think of the culture that I spend a lot of time in, which is in China, and also a lot of Asia. And in many parts of Asia, sex, it's culturally sensitive, and it's very rare to have open conversations about sexual pleasure, especially for women. And when you look at Asian culture, I mean, for 2,000 years, it was basically ruled by Confucian values. And these are very traditional beliefs that emphasize modesty, family duty, restraint, and so pleasure for its own sake is actually seen as selfish or harmful. So when Confucius is prioritizing social harmony and moral order, which actually is what our president of China is also prioritizing as well to this day, you have these key values of filial piety, loyalty, modesty, etiquette, and the fulfillment of one's social roles. So these values place sex within the context of duty, especially with the marriage and family, instead of pleasure. So it's not necessarily a sex negative philosophy, but it is very much a duty based one.
And so I'm not sure I'm understand. Like I totally am interested in what you're saying, and it makes me think of so many questions I could ask you. But
Yeah, ask. I mean,
I
ask away
yeah
if you have any.
yeah yeah okay. So how did you get over sexual shame?
So I grew up in Hong Kong, which was a mix of, it was a British colony. So it's Chinese values, but also it was a British colony for 100 years until 1997 when it was handed back over to China. And I went to English speaking schools. I went to international schools. So it was already very different from local schools or very, very local families. And then when I was 14, I went off to boarding school. I went to Phillips Exeter, where then I started hearing about, you hear about other girls in the dorms, or they're starting to hook up with guys, or they so and so loses their virginity. So I never felt shame myself, but I never felt like in the US, I feel like there's this whole sex positive movement or commercialization of sex. And I never fully jumped on that bandwagon. So for me personally, I was sort of caught between these two cultures and ways of thinking about sex.
Interesting. Well, I can still extract some principles from your answer that I would say to any woman. What did you do? You educated yourself, even if it wasn't conscious. You heard about other people's sexuality. You learned things. You learned about pleasure. And so when someone's trying to overcome shame, like it's not an easy thing, but here's the thing that I like to talk about. I think, and I'd be curious if you agree with this. I think the first step is to name it as shame, because then it's like, okay, this is not me as a person. This is a feeling. This is it, like separates it from who we are. Then I think we have to ask, where did this shame come from? Where did I learn this shame? And then we have to ask, sort of a critical question, a culturally critical question of like, is there any possibility that these beliefs that this is shameful aren't accurate? That they don't, that they're harming me in some way? And then if so, how do I overcome them? And that's reading sex positive literature, learning about your body, learning about the benefits of sex, and then talking to yourself, because believe it or not, we know as psychologists that the way we think really influences how we feel. So saying something like, I have a right to be a sexual being. I am a beautiful sexual being. Sex is a beautiful part of life, or something like that. So I don't know, what's your
Yeah.
thoughts on
That, that leads me to think of the influence of religion.
that? Mm-hmm.
And there are still very religious parts of the US, right, where sex and pleasure is stigmatized or it's tied to guilt.
So many, and especially for women. Yes. And so a lot of times people will ask me, like, how do you help a religious client who's been told like sex is bad? And, a lot of times I'll have to say the reason they're seeing me is because they have been harmed by that belief in some way. They wouldn't be seeing me if they were happy, right? So it's sort of saying to them, I would never step on anyone's culture. And I think we have to be really sensitive to everybody's culture. But I also think it's okay to ask people, are there things that your culture taught you that are harming you, that are not serving you? And how do you reconcile what your culture told you against what science finds? Your culture told you sex is bad or masturbation is bad. Science says it's healthy. Let's talk about that. It's not trying to change someone, but it's opening an open, curious dialogue.
And I think that's something that is very accessible in the States because, Americans are much more likely to seek therapy or relationship counseling. And there is, I feel, especially in these few years, there's a growing culture of talking about sex in serious relationships. And for me, where so I graduated from Harvard Business School in 2012, moved to Beijing to open my etiquette school. And I basically spent 12, 13, 14 years in China before then moving back to LA just recently. It's been very refreshing for me to come back to the US and get in touch with the side of myself that questions things, so questions my
Mm-hmm.
beliefs, questions and it's not necessarily doubting, but it's wanting to better understand and challenge, and then the growth that comes out of that.
It doesn't necessarily dictate where you'll end up, but asking the questions, you know? And so, I mean, I think you have a very unique and wonderful perspective that you bring to the conversation, because I think your experience, and living in both China and the US really does really show us how culture, like how sexual attitudes are culturally based, sexual practices are culturally based. And that's what I often say to people, if especially around the religious stuff too, like if something differs between cultures, doesn't that maybe tell us there's not one truth?
You know what? I always say that about etiquette when people ask me, oh, is this the right way to do it? Is this the right way? And I say, no, a lot of the times there is no right or wrong. It's really about who you're with, what country you're in, what culture you're in. And so I completely agree.
Yeah, there's very few universal right or wrong, of course, in my view, except being cruel to other people, sex without consent. There are some universals, right? But these nuanced beliefs about etiquette, about sex, are culturally based, which then can lead to a curious attitude. If there is no right or wrong, what's right for me?
Because everybody has a different right for me. Something I'm comfortable with may not be something that the next person is comfortable with, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
So I have a question about when it comes to communicating about sex with your partner. What are some of the best ways to start the conversation without making it awkward? You did give us an example of a script earlier, but let's say like if somebody has mismatched libidos, right? And
Hmm.
and actually, I've been in this situation. I was in my early 20s, and I was dating somebody who was about 12 years older than me. And funnily enough, we had the mismatched libido where I felt it wasn't enough. And I wanted more. And for him, he just said his sexual appetite wasn't what it used to be, I guess. I mean, he wasn't that old. He was only in his 30s. But I took it so personally. And I remember I was 23, 24. I would actually cry in bed at night because
Hmm.
I felt so undesired and so unwanted. And it was actually the biggest source of contention in our relationship. So oftentimes when I hear my girlfriends talk about it now when they're married with kids, it's the other way around, right? Their husbands want more sex and the wives are just not interested, or they're too busy, or they're too stressed, or they're taking care of the kids. So how do we handle mismatched libidos with kindness and honesty?
Well, I think you hit on it. I'd say kindness and clarity. That, like, you know, don't blame someone. You never want to have sex. You always want to have sex. Any couple conversation where there's a lot of you, not gonna go well. It's back to owning. I would say provide a road, have the conversation out of the bedroom, and have the goal to be resolving, compromising, and own. And you can give a little roadmap. I want to talk to you about something that I'm scared to talk to you about.
Hmm.
I'm afraid you're going to be defensive. I don't want you to be defensive, but I'm talking to you about this because I want us to be the best we can be. So give a roadmap, give an introduction. I notice that I want to have sex more than you, or you want to have sex more than me. And so you name it. And I feel tension between us. I don't want that tension. I want us to figure out a compromise around this. So, just like you would talk about anything else, get the charge out of it, provide a roadmap, be clear, be kind, and say what you want, you know?
Yeah, thank you for that great script. What about the role of introducing something new into the bedroom, whether it is sex toys, enhancements, or talking dirty?
Same thing. Start the conversation outside of the bedroom. Same principle. I want to talk to you about something I'm super nervous to talk to you about. I'm afraid you're going to take it as a criticism, but it's not. I just want things to be the best they can between us. And I was listening to this podcast, and they were talking, like the host mentioned talking dirty for just a second. And I realized, ooh, kind of got my attention. I think I'd like to try talking dirty to each other. I think that would excite me. What do you think?
On that topic, my husband doesn't speak a word of English. And, being in China, Mandarin was like the third or fourth language that I had to learn. I'm most comfortable in English. And being in China, I dated guys that didn't speak English. And I tell my friends, you have not achieved fluency in a foreign language unless you can talk dirty in bed.
Ah! That's hysterical. I love that. I love that. But don't, trying new things should be, get consent, talk about it outside of the bedroom, and then try it, and then talk about it. You know, I told you I wanted you to talk dirty to me, and I really appreciate you being willing to do that. I thought it would be a turn on, and it actually wasn't. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Just be clear and kind and own your feelings.
Yeah. And to not judge. If your partner brings up something, to not immediately judge or to take it personally, right? To kind of
Yeah.
approach with an open mind. And maybe you're offended by it, but go and think about it and then come back and relay in a gentle tone instead of, becoming up in arms or getting emotional about it.
Right. Clarity, kindness, curiosity, non-judgmentalness, compromise. Those are the guiding principles of good conversations, regardless of if they're about sex or something else.
What is the impact of pornography on expectations of sex in society today?
Oh, huge question. You just opened a big can of worms, as we say. Here's the thing: pornography is here to stay. And the research on whether it's useful or harmful or neither is very confusing. Yes, we know some people develop problems, but we know most people it doesn't. But the one problem we know crystal clear is that if people use it as a role model for sex or as sex ed, then it becomes very problematic. And we do have evidence, at least in the US, of a lot of young people using porn as a role model of sex ed. And non consensual choking is a huge issue we're seeing because it's modeled in porn. And we're starting to see that a lot of women being choked without their consent.
And I mean, it is a huge industry, right? Don't they say the internet was founded because of porn, because they anticipated the demand for porn?
I didn't know that. Thank you for teaching me something new.
I've
Wow.
heard that, and obviously, OnlyFans is huge now. But can porn also be a tool for couples with, let's say, mismatched libidos, a way for them to do foreplay together?
It absolutely a lot of women, sometimes we have to differentiate porn and erotica too. There's a lot of erotica written for women, written audio, visual, where it's not through the male gaze, where women's pleasure isn't secondary. It's not just, excuse me, it's not just Pound Town. Um, and so we know that women are aroused by that. So a woman who's got low desire can use erotica to help turn her on, either before a sexual encounter or with a partner.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the Japanese are really good at erotica. I remember I was watching something on YouTube. I think I was watching interviews of who is that actress in the Blue Lagoon? She's so beautiful. Brooke Shields.
Mm.
I was watching because Brooke Shields was doing like a big press thing. I think maybe a year ago or two ago, and she came out with a book. And then all of a sudden, I was being pushed clips from Blue Lagoon, which are very erotic. I mean, very inappropriate given how young she was, but they're very erotic. And then next thing you know, I was being pushed Japanese erotica of women like getting a massage, and then the massage was like becoming very erotic, and I was like, this is I'm getting kind of aroused watching this.
Yeah, of course you were, because it's arousing to watch arousing material, and people shouldn't be like, it's our body. It's kind of like it's like sweating. It's like laughing. We some when we're tickled, we can't, there are certain responses we can't control, and our arousal is one of them, and women get aroused to erotica.
And you're right, there was no penetration. It was not Pound Town. It was just like very sensual and very erotic, but a huge turn on. So for listeners out there who are struggling with their libidos and trying to find ways to get turned on, go to YouTube and watch Japanese erotica. Just Google like Japanese woman getting massage.
Okay.
So here's my question, Dr. Laurie. Is watching porn cheating? And when does porn use cross the line into being unhealthy or damaging to intimacy, right? I mean, you did say it causes unrealistic expectations, but let's say there's two people in a serious relationship and one of them is watching a lot of porn. Is that cheating?
I think it's there is no right or wrong there. It needs to be discussed, just like anything else. And we could also flip it on its head and say, is somebody who says to their partner, I expect you not to watch porn, are they being rigid, unrealistic? It's a conversation. I certainly don't think it's cheating myself. I think, but when does it become a problem? It becomes a problem when somebody would rather watch porn than go to work, when somebody would rather watch porn than go to their friends, and if somebody would rather watch porn than engage with a partner. If it gets in the way of your life or your sex life, then it's a problem. It's a little bit like alcohol, right? Some people can drink, but they can also go to parties and not drink. And they don't get drunk, or they have one and stop. There are some people who can have porn in their life and still have a very functional life and sex life. For other people, it becomes an obsession, something they have to do. And for a lot of very insecure men, porn becomes it's easier. There's no partner to judge. It's just, and so it's less about the porn than the role. What function is it serving for the user? Like, I went to a workshop on porn once to help clients with it, and there was a metaphor I loved. If somebody's a woman came to therapy and said, my husband never comes home. He's always at the golf course. He plays golf 5 times a week. He never wants to do fun things with me. He only wants to play golf by himself. The therapist wouldn't blame the golf. They wouldn't say, oh, what's wrong? Like, we got it. They would say, what's going on in the relationship? What is he using golf to escape? But when it comes to porn, we're so quick to demonize the porn instead of saying, why is this so important to you? What purpose is it serving?
Yeah, those are really good questions to be asking. I remember I was out to dinner with a couple friends, actually mostly guy friends, and one of them, who's a really good-looking, cool, like very secure guy, and you can tell he's very secure, otherwise he wouldn't have shared the story with us at the dinner table. He said in his mid-20s he joined the No Fap Club. Have you heard of this community?
It's so unhealthy.
Oh, it's unhealthy. So, okay, so he said that in his early 20s he was sleeping around a lot, partying a lot. He didn't feel like he was very respectful of women. And so he joined the NoFap, NOFAP community, which is he said was a peer support platform for porn addiction. He also said he was watching a lot of porn. And so basically joining the NoFap community, he stopped watching porn and he stopped sleeping around, and he purposely, intentionally does not have sex very often. And he said it changed his life for the better. And that prior to this, when he saw women, he was just thinking about how he could have sex with them. And after this, he sees women as like people, and he's more respectful.
That's like a great example, right? Of not everything is, one size fits all. But a lot of times what I was saying is unhealthy. The no-fap community will often tell people don't have sex, don't masturbate. Like they're shaming in general. And, it's sort of like, have you ever heard of No Nut November? Like people are supposed to not masturbate for the month of November. And those kind of messages are very harmful, actually. It's like they're often shaming of sex. So for your friend, it sounds like it was sex and porn were serving a negative. It's underneath. It's like what it helped him with versus just shaming sex in general.
I mean, he did say that now when his wife wants sex, he'll actually turn her down sometimes.
Yeah, I'm guessing this is not going to be end up that healthy
Which,
for him
yeah,
in the
which I
long
think
run.
actually is not that great. I mean, if I wanted to have sex with my husband and he turned me down because he joined some no fap community,
See, yeah.
I would cry at night.
So, it sounds to me, well, I don't know your friend enough, but it sounds like he might have traded one problem for the other.
I wouldn't be entirely surprised.
Yeah.
And then, what's funny is on the flip side, because I mean, so at least, dating in the States, most boyfriends or male partners will watch porn, right? Or have at some point in life. And my husband, who grew up in the 70s and 80s in mainland China, where it was, well, back then it was the Cultural Revolution, and people were struggling even to have warm clothes on their backs and food on the table, they definitely did not have Playboy magazine to be
Right.
rummaging through. So he just never, like, I think that whole generation of men just never really, well, first of all, they didn't know about it, so they just didn't do it. And so my husband he's just never looked at porn, has zero interest. He's very sexual. But as a result, he's like, he's never masturbated on his own because he also just doesn't look at porn. And I remember when he told me this, I was sort of in disbelief because I just assumed that he looked at porn or, would masturbate. But when we did an egg retrieval for IVF, he has to do the husband has to do a sperm retrieval. And
Right.
he had to I kind of just gave him this, the little container and was like, go to that dark room. And he was like, he just couldn't do it. He was like, wait,
Oh my.
he's like in this little room. He's like, I don't what I was like, there's some TV with some porn on, just go. And he's like, I don't find this attractive. This is not turning me
Interesting.
on.
Oh my goodness.
And I was sort of at my wit's end and kind of in disbelief, but now actually I love that about my husband. I love it about him.
Yeah,
And
that's so great.
it's so great. And he's so respectful to women. I think also because what I've noticed is that he has older sisters, and I find that even just amongst my guy friends, like men I know who are little brother and they have older sisters, because they've been exposed to all their older sisters kind of just treat them like a little sister. They understand women, they respect women, and they're just much more comfortable around women, which actually is very
Yeah.
attractive.
Yeah, being respected is very attractive. Yes, absolutely.
So I want to move into a little fun segment that I'm going to call How Would You Say That? And it's a little game where I'm going to read a real life awkward sexual conversation. And Dr. Laurie, I would like you to provide the best etiquette approved way to phrase them. Are you ready?
I'm ready,
All
sure.
right, scenario one. How do you ask your partner to go down on you more?
Again, outside the bedroom. I want to have a conversation with you about our sex life. I'm really scared to do this, but I don't want you to get defensive. I'm doing this because I love you. And I really want us to both be satisfied in the bedroom. And I love receiving oral sex. I love when you go down on me. You do it so well, it feels so good. But I'd like us to do that more often. In fact, I'd like that to be something we do every time we have sex.
Wow, that is so freaking good. Dr. Laurie, that is a fantastic script. And actually on the topic of oral sex, listeners out there, uh, Dr. Laurie, did you try the anti-vorta stuff that I sent you?
I, I have not had a
You
chance to
need
yet. I'm
to.
so
I think
sorry.
I sent you the spray. So it's my feminine care brand that's made with traditional Chinese medicine. And we have wash wipes and sprays for your vulva, the external genitalia, to help with odor, dryness, and irritation, and just to keep you fresh down there and oral sex ready. So listeners, check out Anti-Vorta's intimate spray. Do a little spray before he goes down on you. All right, scenario two. How do you tell someone you don't like what they're doing in bed without hurting their ego?
Again, let's can we be more specific because you need specifics
What's
too.
one that you've commonly seen?
Um, he's too rough on my clitoris. He doesn't trim his fingernails.
Okay, let's do that one.
Okay. So again, I'm not going to keep repeating myself, but the same intro, right?
Out of the bedroom.
So out of the bedroom. So I really like my clitoris being touched. And I know you really want me to have pleasure. And I really would like something from you. And that is before we have sex, I want you to trim your fingernails and file them because my clitoris is very sensitive, sort of like the head of your penis, and I want to make sure it doesn't ever hurt. I only want it to feel pleasurable. And I also realize I've never shown you how to touch it the way that I want it to be touched. And so I think you might be just, doing what you think, but I want to show you a more effective way. So the next time we're together, I want to put my hand on top of yours and show you how I like it to be touched, because I actually like it a lot more gentle than we've been doing.
This is gold. And I like the analogy of the clitoris being as sensitive as the head of his penis. I mean, if you draw the analogy of being like, how would you like it if I put teeth on the tip of your penis? He'll be like, oh, I get it now.
Yes, but that wouldn't be kind.
Right, exactly.
That would not. No.
Which is why we need you, Dr. Laurie. Okay, scenario 3. How do you bring up wanting to schedule sex without making it feel like a chore?
Okay, same thing
Same
outside
intro.
of the bedroom. So I've noticed we're not having sex very often. And I think it's because we're expecting it to be like when we were younger and it was just going to happen. And look, I mean, I would love that to be the case, but it's not realistic. We have 2 kids, we have full time jobs, we're exhausted. And I want us to say it's important to us and set aside time for it. And I actually listened to this podcast, and there was this author who has a book who actually talks about scheduled sex is actually a scientifically supported sex therapy technique, because if we don't schedule it, it just might not happen. And I really want it to happen. So I want us to decide our ideal frequency and make sure that occurs. What do you think of that?
Amazing. Scenario 4. How do you bring up wanting to introduce a sex toy without making your partner feel insecure?
So again, same intro. So when I pleasure myself, I use a vibrator, because it makes my orgasms quicker and easier. And this is not about you, it's about my body and what my body likes the most to orgasm. And I know it's important to you that I orgasm. And it's important to me because I think it's more fun that way. So I would like to bring my vibrator with me into our encounters.
Brilliant. Scenario 5. What can you do if your partner's libido is lower than yours without making them feel bad?
Well, there's always a high partner and a low partner. So it's like I'm going to start sounding repetitive, but same intro. Like, I've noticed you want to have sex more than I do, and or less than I do, and there's tension between us. I don't want tension between us. Like, I think we need to talk about this, just like if you wanted to go out to dinner more than I want to go out to dinner. I want us to find a compromise so that basically you get out good to go out to dinner, some, and I don't have to go out to dinner every night. Like, I want us to figure out what would be our ideal frequency and make sure we have it. And I think if we have that conversation and we could compromise, there'll be less tension between us.
You're so good, Dr. Laurie.
Oh, thank you.
You're so good. You're so good. Okay, I'm sure our listeners will find those scripts extremely handy. Now, I'd like to end with one of my favorite chapters in your book, in your Becoming Clitorate book. And it's a subchapter called It's All Vagina Down There. And you challenge the default of calling everything about a vagina, which is actually very relevant to me in my work right now, because at Antivorta, my feminine care brand, we're trying to rebrand how we care for and talk about our vulvas. And you write about how the language we use to describe the female anatomy can obscure the true picture or even disempower us. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the external area is called the vulva, and the vaginal canal, where babies can come out, penises can go in, is one area of it. And in fact, most women don't orgasm from just penetration. They need vulva stimulation. So by calling our entire genitals a vagina, we're linguistically erasing the part of ourselves that gives us the most pleasure. And we're calling our entire genitals by what gives men the most pleasure, not women themselves. It's a linguistic clitorectomy.
Yeah. And, I feel that a lot of men don't necessarily know the difference between vagina and vulva. So it's really important to have this sort of education and to not stigmatize,
Absolutely.
talking about parts of the female anatomy. And even, I've gotten blowback for my brand for some people who say, oh, you're not supposed to put anything in your vagina. It's like, well, if you knew the difference in anatomy, our products are not for douching. We don't support, putting anything internally. Our products are for your external, your vulva. And you know what? You should actually clean your vulva just like you clean any other part of your body. Like you should clean your ear or clean your armpit. Our tagline is actually be free to care, because we think it's important for women to be free to care how you look, how you feel, however you want, instead of shaming women for whom, doing nothing down there is not working and they're trying to find other solutions.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of women talk about feeling clean makes them feel sexier. So I applaud that. And, I think it's if we called all of men's genitals the testes, I mean, that's what we're doing by calling all of women's vulva, all of our genitals a vagina. We're calling it by a part that's not as sexually useful.
That's true for men. We say, oh, the foreskin, the shaft, the balls,
Right.
the right. Everybody's very clear, like what is what. But
Yeah.
I'll bet you a lot of people don't even know exactly where the clitoris is.
Absolutely, and studies have shown that a lot of people can't identify it on a diagram. So,
You know what's funny is that because obviously in China, actually, interestingly, a lot of Chinese women use feminine care products, but again, because of the culture and the conservatism, people don't really talk about vaginas or vulvas. And in fact, on Chinese social media, a lot of this is censored. And when I told my husband my business idea for starting Antivorta with my co-founder Annie, and she actually suffers from major vaginal dryness because she went into early menopause. At first, my husband's initial reaction was, "Oh, but then when people think of vaginas, will they think of my wife?" And I was like, "Don't be silly, it'll be fine." But even in my head, I was like, ugh. And now when my husband sees me and Annie together, when we finish a meeting, if we're at home, the first thing he says is, "How are my two vagina queens doing? I'm so proud of you two."
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Now I mean, this is a whole different topic, and unfortunately, I have to get off, but so maybe we could talk about it another time. But your friend who went into menopause early, she should probably be on hormone replacement therapy because, or at least get vaginal estrogen because, that's often when, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but I really can't just hear someone has a dry vagina and not address that there are medical interventions for that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dr. Laurie, thank you for helping women reclaim our right to pleasure without shame. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with today?
No, this has been a delightful conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Laurie. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to Mind Your Manners. Please like, subscribe, and check us out on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Sara Jane Ho, and remember, no matter what life throws at you, with me in your ear, you got this.